This is the Long Haul Pedalcast with John McGavick and Steve Schools. Incredible stories of endurance coming from the prairies. Be inspired to create your own long haul journey.
Welcome everyone to the next episode of the Long Haul Pedalcast. It's my pleasure to have Sue Binne, now Sue Binne-Huse, and Steve Schools here to talk about Suzanne's journey from a young aspiring runner at Glenlawn Collegiate to the heights of cross-country running in Canada. I was fascinated with Sue's story when I was an athlete in the 90s running, trying to make my career, my middling career happen as a runner, and just watching her climb the ranks through the high school ranks, but then she really emerged as an incredible runner with the University of Manitoba. I don't know, Steve, you were at the U of M in the mid-90s when I was there. What do you remember about the track team?
You know, it's funny, as a cyclist, you know, it was always tough to find those Manitoba stories of great endurance athletes, but the U of M track team was doing it. Like, they were winning national championships, men and women, and just doing so well. And it really stuck with me. And when you mentioned, hey, we might be able to interview Sue Binne, it was like, oh, I know that name. I read about that name all the time at the U of M in the old newspaper.
In the Manitoban.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was so great to do the deep dive into the Manitoban because we can find the archives here at the U of M. I took a deep dive into the Free Press archives and saw a lot of different stories, a lot of different names. And it was amazing just to see that growth of Sue Binne. And a chapter that my friends and I all talk about because we were racing at the university in the early 2000s is this transition to this club in Missoula, Montana. Who knew anything about Missoula, Montana? But Mountain West Track Club in the early 2000s was known for two things. All of Canada's best female runners were going there to train, and a number of those runners were coming out and making national teams. And Sue was part of this legendary group.
Yeah, no, that was definitely, I never heard that story at all. And really that was really a cutting edge idea at the time.
Totally. And right now, if you're a young aspiring runner and you're in college, you're looking at which team you're going to train with and in which city you're going to go. But back in the 2000s, that was new. And for an all-female team as well, I'm so interested in hearing this story. And then the thing that I absolutely did not know about when I started to do the deep dive on Sue is that she had a third career after Mountain West.
Yeah, as an Ironman and half Ironman triathlete. And not just that, the fact that she is one of the oldest ever to win a pro Ironman triathlon. Like, just the durability and determination and resilience and drive and, you know, over the years and learning from all of, you know, the ups and downs to get to that point in her 40s. Like, what a great story, which is going to be the second part of our podcast.
Yeah. So again, this was a really long podcast, a really long interview, similar to our last one with Adam Smith. We're going to break this up into two parts so that we hear first about Sue's journey from high school to university to Mountain West. And then in part two, we're going to do a deep dive into her career as a pro triathlete. All right. Welcome everyone to the Long Haul Pedalcast. And we are transitioning from what has mostly been cycling stories to one of my favorite stories and a running story with a local Winnipeg legend, Sue Binne. Everyone here would know you as Sue Binne. Now Sue Huse. Welcome, Sue, to the Long Haul Pedalcast.
Oh, well, thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
And I'm here with Steve Schools.
Hey there.
And we were all here at the same time in the 90s when the U of M track team, which has been elected to the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. That's how good you guys were back in the 90s, and produced so many great runners, including yourself, Sue. So welcome again.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a fun time. going back a little bit, but yes, it was awesome.
Yeah. So before we dig into the historic U of M team, let's start in 2001. So 2001, where were you in your running career, and what were the months like leading up to the Canadian National Cross Country Championships in Moncton?
So that was 2001, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I was in Missoula, Montana. I got connected with just a great group, all women's track and cross country team. And there was a handful of us Canadians. We had like Courtney Babcock, Andrea Grove, who Andrea is actually from Manitoba, Vicki Lynch, and Natalie Cote. I don't know if any of these names sound familiar, but they were all, part of the Canadian system. And so we were all down there. And then, of course, there's a handful of American girls, and we just trained. Yeah, it was quite the life. It was like post-collegiate, but, and it was like in a time where we weren't focusing on sponsorships. So we would just train and have fun. So the cross country season, it was just, there's tons of trails and things around Montana. So we would go up in the trails, and then we'd have our interval sessions. So whoever, us Canadians, some of us focus more on track and some of us focus more on cross country. And I was always more cross country as I got older, post-collegiately. But it was Natalie Cote and I that was heading down to Moncton to do cross nationals that year.
So for most track and field folks, right? Like the summer is an intense track season, and then there's a bit of a break in August, and then if you're really ramping up for cross, you start in September-ish. At least on the collegiate side, late August, early September, and then you work yourself up to, in the Canadian world, it's usually the first week of December, right?
Yeah, somewhere on there. Last week of November, I think it was American Thanksgiving is when it ends up landing for some reason. I don't know why.
So,
but yeah.
So can you just tell us a little bit about? There's a lot of questions we have about Mountain West Track Club. At least when I was talking to my friends in the track and cross country world, they have a lot of questions about where that came from and everything. But maybe just tell us what it was like for you and Natalie in September and what you guys were thinking. What are the trails like, and what's the atmosphere like in Missoula when you're doing this build up to nationals?
Well, it's, when we're, as a group, when we're kind of focused on something, that's when things get really, gets intense. Of course, we all get along, but, depending on, some of us are focused more on different times. So, the track girls are kind of on their downtime, and then us cross country girls were kind of more like, focused and zoned in. We always had our long runs on Sundays, and we would go up to this place called Rattlesnake, which isn't, I don't know, it was like a 10-minute drive. Like, the great thing about Missoula is you can drive 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes, and you've got trails just everywhere. Like, we have this great cross country trail, like 5 minutes from our place in Missoula. So it's just so fun to have all this open space. Probably my biggest fear is the grizzly bears, which, I'm told there's no grizzly bears right there, but, bears in general, mountain lions. So we would always drive up to Rattlesnake, and then we'd start running, and you'd end up going uphill for the first half. So we'd go uphill, and we'd always build it. He would call it marathon speed. It's a marathon speed run. So sometimes it's, gets a little intense, and we start maybe racing more than we should. I'd have to say there are a couple times where we left more on the practice field than maybe races. When you're training with a lot of type A people like that, it gets to be, so many good things, but then so many other things that aren't maybe ideal. But yeah, so we would just do these trails, and then we had a loop on the University of Montana cross country course, golf course, that would be our cross country. It's like a 1K loop. So for the intervals, we would be doing 1K loops on the golf course with no golf. I mean, we'd have to, when the golfers weren't around. But yeah, so we would just do intervals on that, and our coach would be there for that part. He'd only be there for the intervals, 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah. So what was a typical week like, and who was the coach there at Mountain West in 2001? The club was Mark and Ann Timmons. So they originally started this team as a men and women. They just both love track, and they wanted to support it. And they started as men and women, but I think it was just a little bit too much drama, and felt like women didn't have as many opportunities as men. So then they just went to straight all women team. They used to own a house kind of like over by Rattlesnake. And then when I was there, it was like they had it's like kind of an apartment complex where there's like 6 apartments. And so we would just kind of, some of us would be over with a roommate, another runner. If you were married, like Vicki Lynch came in, she was married. So her and her husband moved into a 1-bedroom. So we all kind of lived kind of close together. But yeah, Mark Timmons kind of ran. He was the guy. Yeah. He was the coach. And then your typical week would be you got a long run up at Rattlesnake on Sunday.
Sunday, yep.
K intervals would happen when?
Tuesdays and Fridays. And then Mondays and Thursdays were kind of what we called medium runs. So you wouldn't be an easy run. You would like just kind of, you'd have like 4 to 6 miles in the middle of like medium run. And then Wednesdays were easy and Saturdays were easy. I guess my biggest downfall with that is I can't handle that kind of mileage. And I think that's where, for me, it took me a while to realize that I needed to like adjust to what my body can handle. So that's kind of the whole 2000, from the progress of starting to ending, just getting older and realizing more that I need to do, what's best for my body and not as a whole group.
Yeah. So 2001, you're a few years out of college.
Mm-hmm.
You're in your mid-20s, figuring out what it's like to train as a full-time athlete.
Yeah, exactly.
And
by the end of the season, like getting towards cross country, the actual nationals, we had quite a bit of snow. So then we were inside training. So we have a 200-meter indoor track where we would train, which was awesome. I love 200-meter indoor tracks. It's like you feel so fast. And I think that was just it. It's like for me getting ready for Moncton, I was just, we were all just kind of pushing each other, and especially like Natalie and I who were racing. And there was a couple other Americans that were really strong cross country runners. So they were getting ready for theirs. And yeah, it was just a good environment. And somehow it was just, it was going well.
And we talked about this in our last episode with a young kid who is now he's on the pro circuit in Europe cycling, and he gets coached wattage based. So it's power based from his coach. And he said, I just stick to it. I do exactly what the coach says, and I don't deviate from that. But when you're in a group, like you just talked about, there's the good and the bad that come with it. So if Natalie's running a little bit faster or putting in a little extra mileage, then you're trying to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had, when I've run cross country, I always have this team feel because we're going in as a team of 7, right? And even though maybe I'm looking at where I fit relative to the guy who's in 3rd or 4th or 1st, I also feel like I'm part of a team.
Yeah.
So what was that team dynamic like for you? You and Natalie were going for sure. Was Andrea going or anyone else?
I'm trying to think back that year, because there are certain years that Natalie went and Courtney went and Andrea went. But I think that year it was just Natalie and I. I think being in Moncton, that's a far way to travel from Missoula, Montana. And I think partly, I think Andrea and Courtney had come off of a later track season. And so they were just like, no, I'm not going to do cross country that year sort of thing. So, yeah. But yeah, it's definitely like certain people are in better, like, especially if they're like, building up for outdoor track. I'm like, there's certain times where Courtney Babcock, her morning runs were, that's not my morning run pace. So, you have to learn to be like, no, I'm just going to go on my own recovery run, especially the recovery runs when you're like, if I'm getting out of breath and exhausted from recovery runs, like that's not good. So just like learning like, okay, I'm sitting this one out, or I'm going to cross train this day. That was Wednesdays just became a cross training day for me. Everyone else would go for an easy, 8-mile run. And I'm like, nah, I'm hitting the pool or I'm getting on the bike, just because I just knew I couldn't handle that.
At that point, you start to know like where your body's at. But what was there a sense of we're in this together, where they're helping you out? You guys have a big goal for December. Their team's rallying behind you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, to a certain extent, especially towards November when those girls coming off their tough track season, they're kind of building up fitness again. So they'll jump in, especially when we're just doing speed towards the end of, getting ready for the race. They're like, oh yeah, they'll jump in for the last 400 of a, 8 or 1200 meter interval or something like that. So yeah, definitely it was a supportive group of girls for sure.
And for our younger listeners, that is the thing that I feel is the most important in your post-collegiate year, is to find that group to run with. You're in this zone that's challenging because some of your friends have retired from running. Some people have moved on to other things. You might feel a little bit alone in this journey. You're not sure where this journey is going to end up. But if you're surrounded by a few other people that are really excited and really supportive of what you're doing, I feel like it really bolsters you.
Yeah. Yeah. And just builds off each other. You're helping them and they're helping you. And I think,
totally.
Right.
And in
Yes.
2001, this was a relatively new thing. I don't think there were many people that were. Right now, we have some training groups in the US that are really big, and people can see themselves after college going to maybe a training group, either as a professional runner or as someone who's going to do this full time. In 2001, if I'm looking back at this, I can only remember Guelph having sort of a training environment where people would want to go after they're done. Even 2001, Reed Colset and Eric Gillis and Stephanie Mills, I think, was out there, and
Yeah.
people are starting to build out east, and then out west, Win Gimitrowski, another Winnipegger, was sort of building a group, I think, out in Victoria. But there wasn't this sense of we're all going to go down and train as a group in a full-time setting. So I think you guys were really ahead of the game.
Well, and we were just, so fortunate. Like, even I remember getting done college, and my close friend is Andrea, and she was the one that first showed up in Missoula for this team after she got done at the University of Minnesota. And I remember telling my parents about this, like, oh yeah, what do you think about me going to, Missoula? I'll just, live with these girls. And of course, my parents, the protective parents there, they're like, so you're telling me this guy is going to pay you to live and train and go on. He's like, that sounds a little bit, sketchy, but it really wasn't. Like, we would see him 3 times a week if we were just training. Like, he would come to races with us, but we'd all get our hotel rooms. But he's just so generous and wanted to have people have these opportunities that otherwise would be impossible. And so it was just like a great, it was, once we, even for me, cause I graduated, stayed through to the Canada Games, and then went to Missoula, and my parents were very worried that I wouldn't do my 8 months in Calgary for my dietetic internship.
Oh, yeah.
So I showed up in Missoula for like 3 months, and then I moved to Calgary for 8 months, and then came, and they were still like, yeah, come back. And I was just like, oh goodness, like, these are cool opportunities that I felt like I can't, how my life has changed because of that. Never expected to stay in the US, but meet my husband, all these things, but you just never know where the opportunity will come.
And so what are the logistics like going there? They're giving you a place to stay. Mm-hmm. Are they paying for your travel to go to meets? Are they paying for your room and board, like your food?
Yep. We pay for our food, but
okay. They
paid for our housing. They paid for our shoes, our physical therapy, like massages, all the trips. They would cover all that as well. Yeah.
So living the dream.
It was a pretty good deal. Yeah. Yeah.
Great deal.
Without having to spend hours on the internet and on social media trying to do your sponsorships and staying on top of all that, just for all these young athletes trying to survive through sponsorships. It's so hard, being able to train and not have to stress about, if I'm going to be able to afford the trip that I want to, the big meet that I want to go on. So huge.
So huge. Everyone thinks you're crazy for moving out there. You're thinking, this is exactly what I need to get me to the next level.
Well, and I'm like, why not? Otherwise I'm basically just going to start working, and, I'll have that for the rest of my life. Like, this is a great opportunity to just see what I can do. And, I think I stayed home in college. I lived at home, through my time at the University of Manitoba, and I have no regrets on that, but it was kind of like a little bit of that kind of almost college experience, like, that I didn't have before. So I felt like that was kind of a nice opportunity to do that.
And Steve and I have talked about this, and I talk to my friends about this almost every time we meet. We usually go to national cross country championships, actually, as masters athletes, just a reunion and a reason to keep running through the fall. But you don't peak athletically, so let's say physically, but also mentally, till your late 20s, early 30s. And you finish college at 22 or 23, depending on where you're at. So you have a 5-year window between leaving that intensive training environment to when your body is going to be ready to be at its best, to compete for a national team, to go to world championships. So you need to find someone to fill that 5-year gap. What were you thinking in terms of your potential moving forward? And at this stage of the game, you're in your mid-20s, thinking to yourself, I'm going to keep doing this until what age? And then what are the things that you think you need to get you to that next level so that you're going to be wearing that maple leaf one day on that jersey, on that singlet?
Gosh, I don't know. I think it was just like really just enjoying the moments. Like, it's like, okay, I get to go to Moncton and I do nationals, and I'm like, oh, I'm making worlds. Like, this is so cool. Like, and just like, and then obviously working my butt off between making it and worlds, maybe too much, but just kind of like just enjoying like each step and just thinking, gosh, what else can I do? And figuring things out along the way. Like I said, I can't do that mileage, or yeah, guess what? I need to eat more calories. That makes me run better, not worse. Or I don't have to look like that girl in order to run fast. Like just figuring things out. Just so much, like you said, even mentally, like I, like just having more confidence, like just coaching high school cross country and track. You just realize how you can get in your head. Like these girls just are worried about stuff that you're like, no, you don't have to worry about that. But I worried about that when I was in high school. Like, just being able to, you want to say like, hey, this is just enjoy this process of like being a high school athlete and just having fun. And so, yeah, you just learn so much along the way that I do feel fortunate that I got to extend my running and not just think, oh, high school, I'm done and I'll just move on.
So you're in this training group in Montana, and you're kind of living the dream, as John says, and you're kind of just enjoying this situation where you're in this great group. But now you kind of have some goals. You're going to go to Moncton, run nationals. But take us through that story. Like, are you thinking I'm going to try and do really well and make the world's teams? Like, take us through that phase now where you're going to maybe your first like super big race, super big goal coming out of that training group.
Yeah, I think that was the goal, to make worlds, for sure. You're like, okay, if I can stay up with Natalie, because, she was a stronger runner than I was. I'm like, if Natalie can, if we can push each other and I can stay, hold on to her a little bit, that we can do it. Yeah, it was just kind of exciting and just, it just made you kind of put so many eggs in the basket. Like, okay, I'm going to do this right. I'm going to do this right. I'm not going to stay up late. Just sleep is such an important thing. And just the travel, like, okay, when we get there, we need to do all, you have everything planned out, without trying to be too anal about everything and just not enjoying, it's just like everything's a stress trying to get ready. It's like, okay, let's have fun and let's, do what we can, I guess, is just do the right things and whatever will happen, will happen.
And how did that race go in Moncton?
It went pretty well. I do remember it was raining. It was cold and rainy, which I guess isn't surprising. For some reason, I remember there being like some hay bales, and maybe that was worlds. I don't know. I just remember it being kind of a challenging course,
right? And
just trying to like stay up with that top group was just definitely the goal, and just trying to, going through that pain of, okay, I can keep pushing myself. I can do this, not giving up mentally when the race was going on. I remember hurting a lot.
Yeah. For the listeners that don't know, and I think this is probably for me the most special part of cross country. If you're in the running world, you probably know what letsrun.com is. And letsrun.com says the World Championships of cross country running is the greatest distance race in the world. And I agree with that. And I would say the greatest distance race in Canada is the Canadian Cross Country Championships, because, and just looking at your race in 2001, you've got, first off, NCAA athletes who are coming back from the
right.
NCAA. Mm-hmm. So high school kids that have left and now they're training at a super high level and they're coming back. You have Olympians who have, or people that have made a World Championships team in the past. They're coming back. And then the last part of this is you have everyone from the 1,500 meters to the marathon who are all coming together. I remember in Kingston one year, we had the national 1,500 meter champion and record holder. And then we had the marathon champion and record holder, and everyone in between all coming together. And they were all there in the last K, right? And so
that is crazy. Yeah.
You had Emily Mondor, who was first girl to break 1,500, first woman to break 15 minutes in the 5K. Sarah Dupre, Carmen Duma coming back from the U.S. Emily stayed here. Natalie Cote, also one of our best collegiate runners. So as you're preparing for this, you have to compete against a 1,500 meter runner or someone who's already been there, someone who's training at Villanova. What's going through your head, and what are some of the kind of things you're thinking you need to work on so that you can compete against these?
Well, I think part of it is that I felt like I was fortunate because I'm training with these really amazing ladies. These girls that I'm training with some of these girls ran in college, in the US, some of them ran in Canada. So I felt like I had a huge benefit there because I feel like sometimes we race a lot and we're, pushing each other. So that was huge going in. Like, okay, if I was just in Winnipeg training by myself, then maybe I wouldn't have that extra confidence of just like, okay, I don't know how I stand among other people. So I think that helped a lot. And I think just the growth of like over the years of, I'd had done nationals in the past. Like when I was at the University of Manitoba, we would go and do nationals sometimes, but it was never as serious because CIs was the big race. And then you're kind of like, oh, this is just for fun. This is just to kind of get you ready for down the road when it's serious. So I do feel like at least that helped, though. You've been around it and had that experience. So now it's like, okay, I'm fit, I'm strong, mentally I'm in a better place than, because I've matured. So I think it was just like, okay, this is it. Like drain the tank.
Drain the tank. And so then
Yeah.
at the end of that race, great news, you finish in the top 10. Natalie finishes in the top 5. You both qualify for the world's team. So the national team's going to Dublin. And how does that feel?
Pretty good. Yeah, it was exciting because it was like the first, real national team where I'm like going to Europe to run. It was like, it felt pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like it's like, okay, I did it.
And you had to grind it out because when did you finished in 97 at U of M?
Yes.
So that's 4 years in between really high, a lot of success, let's say at the university level. And then 4 years on your own trying to make it and trying to make a Pan Am Games team or an Olympic team or a FISU team, right?
Yep.
And then finally you take the direct flight from Missoula to Moncton.
Yeah, right.
and then earn yourself that Maple Leafs. That must have been amazing.
Yeah.
So
yes,
maybe
it was very cool.
Let's turn back the clock to Glenlawn Collegiate. And what it was like for you in high school. So your high school career started with Assiniboine Optimist, AOTC.
Yes. Well, TACUS at the time, but then they converged later on. But
Okay.
Yes, with Scott Radley, who he was a great coach. He made it fun, and it was we trained. I remember we would switch around different parks, St. Vital Park, Assiniboine Park, and go to different parks to do our like hard workouts. We'd meet 3-4 times a week, and and it was just a different atmosphere because the track, Glenlawn track, and then there was Cassette and I, she was the other big runner in Winnipeg at the time. And both of us had our clubs. So when it came to track season in the high school, it was hard because both of us wanted to still train with our club.
Right.
Which nowadays, like, I'm sure it's like, nope, you got to train with the high school. But back then they're like, I think between the two of us, they're like, okay, fine. You only need to come to 2 practices a week or something. So we were able to still practice with our clubs at the time, which I just definitely didn't have as much of a team feel because we were, all doing our own thing. But it was, she was competitive. We had a big group, especially before Andrea left. She was a year older, but when you're doing, provincials and all that, you're competing against. We had a good group of girls, and we were really.
Andrea was at Glenlawn too?
No, but when at provincials, we would compete against each other. She was at Shaftesbury. Yeah, Shaftesbury.
Right.
So, but her and I trained together. So her and I were in the same training group with Scott Radley.
Okay.
And then Cassette was on her own kind of group. So
now, when we spoke earlier, you said one of the benefits of training with Scott is that he kept it fun and light, and that you always felt excited. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it wasn't as stressful as it could have been, or as you saw other athletes. And I remember going to Legion camp down in Peace Gardens, where you could see some people are just stressed.
Yeah. Making
that team and doing the next thing was really stressed. But you said it was really light. So what did Scott do that was so good for you and the other athletes within TACUS?
I don't know. I think he just was like, we would have games where there's one of our practices, he would hit a golf ball and we would have to run to the golf ball and run back. I think he was just getting some good golf hits in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for us, it was like every distance was different. We weren't worried about time because we don't know. He could have hit it 200 feet or 10 feet or who knows, so we would just run as fast as we can there and back. And no time, we didn't focus on the times. We didn't, every now and then we would, but a lot of it was just kind of chill. And I remember him doing a session where we would we were working on relaxation. And I think that was a big deal at the time too, and you would like tighten your muscles and we would relax. And he would go through this whole thing with a big group of us, guys and girls or whatever. So it was just like, he wasn't just doing the running part. He was working on other things too. So yeah, and it was just, we had some fun girls, Trisha Townley, she was another one. So we had like a good group with us. And so I think it really helped just make it fun. And I mean, I remember by our last year, like our senior year, he wasn't too keen on us like playing basketball or volleyball. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, there's a risk of getting hurt, but we did it, if we wanted to, we'd do it anyway. But
And so during that high school year, there was some of the best women distance runners that came out of Manitoba in that era. Yourself, Andrew Grove, Cassette Taylor. And we talked about this earlier. What was that? You're racing each other all the time in cross, in provincials, provincial track championships, trying to qualify for Canada Games, that kind of thing. Was there a moment in there where you realized this is going to be where I'm going to stake my identity as a runner and I'm going for this? I can see a long-term vision where this is where I want to be.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and they were better than I was. They were running faster times than I was. And so within my high school, it was like, oh, Cassette Taylor. And I was kind of like, the second thought, which, looking back, I'm like, hey, it made me more driven. It made me more like want to prove myself, but at the time, it's kind of hard when you're not like getting as much recognition as some of the other people. But looking back, I'm like, oh, no, it was good. It was good because it kept me on my toes. It kept me wanting more. It kept me wanting to push myself. And then she was a year older than me. And, Andrea, she's got a lot of energy. She can talk her head off. So it's good. She was great to run with because she would just talk during these runs and they would go by so fast. So she was a great training partner in that sense.
That's really good. I think sometimes people automatically put themselves in a category when you see someone who's running that fast or is doing that well in cycling, and you say, okay, well, they're at that level and I'm not at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But the right mentality is to say, how do I get to that level?
Yeah.
Or what's my next step going to be? So the next big transition in your life would have been choosing where to go to school after high school. Your high school career was peppered with a lot of great results, a lot of medals, making provincial teams. And now the decision is, at least in my world and in the running world that I run in, no pun intended, but there's this decision. Am I going to go to an NCAA school or am I going to stay in Canada and try in our day, it was the CIAU, try the CI's route. Right now it's U Sports. And every 4 years when the Olympics come up or when the World Championship comes up, we have this discussion within our group of let's look at the national team and see how many people came out of U Sports, the Canadian system, how many people came out of NCAA, the American system. And it's usually half and half. But when you're in high school, it's such a hard decision. So what was that like for you? Were you getting offers in the US? Were you thinking about going to the US? How did you choose U of M?
Well, so I knew Andrea had left the year before me, and I know she was Minnesota. They really wanted her. She had run some really fast times as a high schooler. So she had taken off. She had gone to Minnesota, was really enjoying it. I knew Cassette Taylor was going somewhere. I can't remember where, but she was going. I know a couple of the other Canadian high schoolers were going, but there was always a little push from Athletics Canada to try and to stay, to kind of build the Canadian system. But in reality, I never got I never got any offers from any US schools. There's the internet, now I try and find results from back then. I can't even find results. Like there's probably no way to know really, unless you're like Andrew Grove that just ran a crazy time and then it kind of trickles down. So I had no offers to go anywhere. And then we did have somebody come in, like meet with our family and do like a little recruiting thing. I think, when you can pay a recruiter to come in and find you schools. So he came in and met with us just to kind of discuss, the process. And the cost was just going to be too much that we couldn't. And then it didn't even guarantee, and the times I was running, I may not have gotten much at that time to cover, and to pay for US and all that stuff, and room and board. And so it was just like, no, just stick around here. The University of Manitoba was interested, and they offered me some scholarship. So I was like, yeah, I'll stick around. And then my friend Christy Pearson was coming back, so she was going to be going to the University of Manitoba. And I was like, hey, there's a good group, Byron and Tom and Jeff and Simon, like those guys were all like a year or two older than me. So there was just a good group of like Alana and Sprinter Jana, Nickel. There was just a good group. Like the University of Manitoba had a good team. And so it was like, you know what? I'm just gonna do this.
Nice.
Live at home. Nope. No rent to pay, no student loans. And then we had Ron Melnick. That's when Christy and I approached Ron Melnick about coaching us. So he became my coach when I started at the University of Manitoba.
Was he a coach at the U of M at the time?
He was coaching Chris Weber, the camps. So yeah, he was. Like at that point, it was like there was multiple coaches that were coaching. They weren't like the main staff people. Like I think Claude was the main distance coach, but I think but Ron was like part of. But he had just coached guys before then. So we were his first female athletes, which I think took a little bit of it, just a little bit different. There's a little more emotions going on during practices and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I find that's amazing. It's an amazing skill set of the coaching staff at the U of M. When they see that coaches who are developing certain athletes are doing well, they bring them into the fold, right? So Ron might not have been an official head coach, and Bruce Perney would have been there. Alex Gardner would have been there.
Mm-hmm.
Legendary coaches in the Canadian track and field scene. Claude was just getting started as a head distance coach.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than saying, no, it's my way or the highway, the U of M program is really good at saying, okay, you've developed some good athletes and we want to see those athletes succeed. So why don't you come into the fold and you can be an assistant coach with the distance group. And so that's sort of what happened.
Yeah, it was. And we would all still practice at the same time. So we'd all be there after, and we'd all be, all over the track, the distance guys, even if it was two different groups, and the sprinters. It was just, after classes, at the end of the day, everyone's there at the track and working out. So
the transition from high school to, sorry, you kind of froze up there, but the transition from high school to university.
Yeah, I know. So did you guys.
Oh, sorry. The transition from high school to university is huge and super challenging for a lot of athletes. The early years can be peppered with injuries, a jump in the training load, a little bit more pressure. You're now trying to qualify for Can West. You're hoping to hit times for CIs, and that's the biggest pressure on you. Where in high school is a little lighter, you weren't necessarily qualifying for teams. If you could get onto a team, that'd be great, but it wasn't part of your identity. And I was training with John Iwanski at the time, and I remember you guys doing like what seemed like 3-hour workouts at Max Bell. I just remember how much mileage and how long your workouts were, and it just blew my mind. So what was that like for you to make that jump from Scott to Ron? And then, tell us a little bit about what that training was like.
So it was definitely a jump. And going back to, I think it was our first interval workout, Ron gives us this workout. We're like, he is doing us repeat 800s faster than our PBs. Because I don't think he realized really, we were like, I think the camps lied about our best times when they were, trying to tell Ron, oh yeah, you should coach these girls. I think they may have maybe changed the times a little bit. So yeah, it was a little bit of a shocker. I mean, of course we were like, Ron, this is, not going to work. But we did what he can. And it was definitely, I look back, so we started in the fall, ran through cross country, ended up with a stress fracture on my tibia. There was a lot of negativity around it by some of the other coaches, like, oh, she's never going to come back. Once you have a stress fracture, you're all done. And I don't know if that's more of the idea back then. This was 97, or no, not 97. This is 92. So again, I think that's just my mentality is like, well, screw you. I'm going to prove you wrong, So I came back, and actually I was faster than ever. I just worked on my strength. I biked and I swam, and I came back faster and fitter than I was before. I remember running my first 400 after that. And it was like, oh, wow, this is like, I broke my fastest time in the first 400 I ran. So, yeah, it was definitely ups and downs and just trying to figure out, with like you said, you're in university now and just like, so much more pressure. And then trying to figure out the balance with new coaches, just like Ron and, it wasn't an easy transition in the sense of like same coach from high school to university. So just dealing with that and him, not having had girls and before, just, there was definitely a lot of figuring things out, but I think that's part of the fun, right? Just kind of, all right, this is, and that's what I try and tell athletes now when I'm coaching is like, it's not a linear process. You're going to be some ups and downs. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the bad races are actually, you're going to learn more from a bad race or from a crappy season than you in some ways from a good one, because you know what not to do, or what needs to be changed. So, but yeah, it took me a couple of years, I think, to get to where I felt like I was competitive in the CIAU system.
And you got there by your fifth year for sure. But maybe I just finished reading Lauren Fleshman's book, mm-hmm. Good for a Girl. And I also listened to a podcast with Malcolm Gladwell and Shalane Flanagan's mom. And I think Kara Goucher might have been on too. And they say there's something super important in athletics about having female coaches coaching young female runners. Mm-hmm. What was something that you think, or what's some advice that you give to a young female runner transitioning from high school to university about what's different about being a female runner, and what are some of the things that they should be considering about their health, their well-being, their mental state as they're trying to make their own journey into professional running?
I guess I would say that it's not one shoe fits all. Like everybody has a different, how much nutrition one person needs is different than the other. What people's bodies looks like is different. Just how many miles is, it's not going to be the same for everybody. So as much as you're in a team, you still have to kind of individualize within the team of what's best. And so just because Mary Jane is running 80 miles a week, it doesn't mean that you have to. And I think that's super important. Or that you have to enjoy the process. You can't just be like, oh, I'm here because I want to win nationals. It's like you have to like the grind. You have to like part of just the learning process. If you don't enjoy that part, you're never going to get to where you want to be. So kind of enjoy it, have fun with it. Even in high school, like, you say, oh, I want to make, whatever. I want to be top at state. Well, let's think about some of the steps to get there, and let's, how can we do it so that it fits for you, and not, just say, oh, I want to, what's your B goal? What's your C goal? And that's not just have an A and then it's a loss if you don't get there.
Yeah. And did Ron pivot at all? Did he come around as a coach to say, okay, I need to coach girls, you and Christy and whoever else was on the distance squad at the time, a little differently than was Amanda there too? Amanda Yunka.
Yeah, but she never coached. I'm trying to think of who was her coach.
But yeah, like, so what did he come around? Did he
oh yeah,
a little bit differently and see that, okay, the Kemps are going to do this and my women's team's going to do this.
For sure. I mean, it didn't take him long to realize that, we just can't handle that kind of volume that some of the guys, especially they're also like 3-4 years older. So just kind of seeing where we're at. And I look back even now, like, have you guys ever heard of Dr. Stacy Sims?
No.
She's a nutrition scientist that is all of her studies and all of her research is on women. Mm-hmm. Because all of the research in the past on sports have been on men and nothing on women. And so her big focus is, okay, so this works for guys, but we need to look at what works for women. And that has made a huge change in how I approach training my last 4 years as an athlete than back in high school. In high school, in college, it's like, oh, I'm not getting my period. This is great. I must be, really lean. But that's not the way it works. You don't want to lose your period, Yeah. When I was training for Ironmans, I never lost my period, but I did when I was trying to look like the other girls in high school. Right. So I think that's just been a huge change just overall in society and just knowing what works for women more than what works, than, not just putting us all in the same category.
Nice.
So yeah, I kind of got sidetracked and I'm not even sure what the question was anymore.
No, that's good. And so before we get into maybe the more recent years, you were a top 3 athlete in high school in Manitoba. And then by your 5th year, you were a top 3 athlete in Canada, running for the Bisons, scoring points, getting medals at CIs, qualifying for CIs every year. What did you do, and what did Ron help you do to get you to the point where you were thinking, okay, I'm competing on a national level. I'm one of the best runners in the country, not just one of the best runners in Manitoba?
I think we incorporated more like some strength training in there, which really helped. And we were able to really taper. I think that was a huge thing, is like learning the taper difference between like guys and girls. And, and if you're taping for a 1K and a 1500 is different than you're taping for cross country. I was like actually going back because, this whole thing got me thinking, and I actually kept a journal when I was like, for those first 4 years in college. And I was like, wow, right before CIs, it was like 4 times 400. And it was like, basically, all out. And I was like, oh, with like tons of rest in between, which is, in the middle of training season, you're not taking much rest, but actually just working on like just full on speed by the end. I think that was a big benefit to me on the track, especially like indoors when it's the longest distance, like 3K. I didn't even do really 3K indoors. I just did 1K and 1500. And I think just knowing what my body needed more than, I just never been a huge mileage person.
Right.
So I think that was a big thing.
And when it's N of 1, it's really not to figure it out, and it takes some years. So
yeah.
Let's fast forward a bit. So you've done a few years with Mount West. You finally make the team. You go to Dublin. What happened in Dublin? So Dublin was World Championships in 2002, World Championships cross country.
Right. So between nationals and worlds, training was great. And Natalie and I trained together, and it was all going according to plan, and I was probably running faster than I had, ever. And then all of a sudden, a week before, my hip just really started hurting, and I couldn't run. So I could, and at that point, it was too late to give the alternate position, because it was like basically like it was like probably like the last or second last hard workout before I was leaving, and all of a sudden, it was like, this is not good. So that was devastating. So,
take us through how you feel about that. Because at the time, right? Because I think like this podcast, we try and go through the ups and downs. Like you made a great point. This is not a linear process, and it's so hard for our minds to adjust to that. But I mean, you've obviously had a great career, but there are those low moments, and not to push you on this one, but just what that feels like is you've now achieved this huge goal, but now you kind of, now it's gone sideways. So maybe take us through that a little more.
Well, I remember I remember I was on the indoor track, and I was doing an interval, and all of a sudden my hip was just like sudden pain. And I was just like, oh shoot, like this is not good. I may have used a different word than shoot, but and it was just like, there's a lot of tears after that, like at the end of that day, because I knew that this was not something that was going to get better in like a week. So, and then it was like the balance of like, do I go? Do I not go? Like everything is paid for, everything's set. No one else can go, do I just go and try and run? And I think that's what we ended up thinking. Like, I'm like, well, I can start the race and see what happens. Yeah. And I did, but I didn't get very far. Okay. So it was a real bummer. And then you just don't feel like you're on this team, but you just don't feel as much part of the team because you're injured. And that's the hardest thing. And I see, even in coaching high school, I see that with some of the athletes when they're injured. It's just, you want to, as much as you want to keep them involved, it's just the motions that you're going through. Even if everyone's like, come on, hang out, you're with them the whole time, you just don't feel like you're as much part of it. You just feel like you're just, it was really sucked. So, yeah. But I ended up staying in Dublin for a week or so and touring about, and took advantage of that. So that was good.
So you're able to take some good.
Yes.
At the end of the week, I mean, as horrible as it felt, you were able to take some good out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, oh, I got to go check out the Guinness factory and see some like chateaus and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, and it was a long process to get better from that. And at that point, 2001, I really only ran like as a stipend athlete for Mountain West, I think until 2000. So I think I was with them for 3 years as a paid athlete. So we have a combination of the stipend athletes and then the athletes that just train with us. So I was still training with them, but I wasn't a stipend athlete. So they would still help me with trips and stuff like that, but I wasn't getting a monthly stipend, and
Okay.
they weren't paying for my housing.
You had to find
So,
it.
so that was just a little bit different, but we were still, and some of the girls, I think one of the Vicky was on maternity leave and this and that. So, but it was just, yeah. So I just came back and I started just, kind of took the summer off, obviously let heal, but, then started making my way back to training. I just think, I just didn't think there was any other, I was working at the time too. So that was good. So it wasn't like my whole focus in life was just running, which was, I think, in the end, looking back, is that, so I started working after that injury. And I think that's what helped me be a better athlete too, is not focusing all my time and energy on running, like actually having a balance. So I'm not thinking when I'm sitting around that I should be training, that you're doing other things. So you're distracted. So you don't overthink things too.
So for a lot of people, your identity is wrapped up in making that national team. You want to feel like you're part of the team, and it doesn't happen. And you've trained so hard. You've battled so many battles. You've won, you've come back. And I think people might walk away from that and just say that I'm done. I'm burnt. But I feel like your identity has always been as an athlete, as someone who doesn't give up, who keeps training.
Well, and I think I just know it. It's like kind of like my mental health too. It's like, I know I feel better when I work out and I do things. And I think I have a balance maybe at some point in my life, when I was just running full time, maybe that's where the balance was like, maybe it wasn't as good. But then I felt like once I kind of tipped it to this is healthy, I think after having my first baby was when I was like, oh my gosh, this is healthy. Like I'm just focused on being healthy. And I think that changed a lot of like, okay, I'm just, especially you're pregnant and then you're nursing, and I started training after having the baby, but I wasn't training because I wanted to make a national team necessarily. I was training because I wanted to feel good and I wanted to get back in shape, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to come back and be, it wasn't a goal after I had my first baby to go back to nationals. But
then you did.
There I was a year later at nationals, fitter than ever because I wasn't overtrained.
So you're out of the stipend group for 7 years. You miss the worlds, you have a child, and then you're getting super fit and you decide, what the heck? I'm going to go race nationals.
Yeah. I think, who was it that went? Was it Courtney that went that year with me, or is it Andrea? So some of the girls and I was still part of the team. Like they still covered my flight to get there, which was so great.
It was Andrea.
It was Andrea. Right.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, I was just, her and I started training together again. And it was like, oh, why not? Especially if they're going to help me get there and pay for the hotel. It's like, and I think it was like, I remember that summer. So my son I had him in November. So it was probably like 8 months. And I think I ran like this really fast 5-mile race. And I remember Natalie specifically saying to me, what kind of secret training are you doing? And I'm like, I'm not. I think my secret training is that I'm only running every other day. So, it's just one of those things that it came a lot more naturally to me when I wasn't pounding, when I wasn't spending so much time worrying about it and putting mileage.
Yeah. And how old are you at that time?
I was 33 when I went to nationals again.
So now you're going
32.
32, and you're going up against Megan Metcalf, future Olympian.
Yeah.
Carmen Duma, future Olympian. Aster Demisi, who I trained with at U of A, who's an Ethiopian who emigrated.
Okay, I don't even know his names. I don't even.
Lisa Harvey. So it was a stacked group that was showing up in Guelph that year, which it always did. Whenever nationals is in Ontario.
Yeah, it's easy to get to.
Easy to get to, and you're racing some of the best. And
I got to know Lisa Harvey and that whole Calgary group when I did my internship there for dietetics. Cool. So when I was there for those 8 months, I trained with like Lisa Harvey and just that whole kind of clan, that whole group, which was nice.
So do you remember that race at all? What did you need to do to get on the team?
Well, I think it's top 10, but then it just depends on down, who decides not to go.
Exactly,
So just like the roll down. I remember it was the first time I left my son. So I had made sure I had to wean. I had to get him weaned before I left. And then it was the first time I'd be gone for 4 days or something. So that was a little bit hard. But I also knew if I'm going to be gone, I'm going to actually make it worth it. But yes. And Andrea, it was again okay, I'm just going to hang with Andrea. I'm just going to stay with Andrea. And I knew Lisa and I knew those girls. So I just tried to stay with the group. I remember it being a lot of open fields and having this big hill towards the end.
Okay. Yeah.
And it being just, it's always cold, but was there snow at the time? I don't think so.
We would have to go back. George Aiken always had these great albums of shots from national championships.
Oh yeah.
That he puts on Facebook. But a couple noted people that you beat, Lanny Marchand, who went on to represent Canada at a few Olympic Games in the marathon.
Oh, cool.
He took a spot away from Lanny. And Hillary Stellingworth.
Oh yeah, right.
Also was in that race, and you beat.
She's quite a bit younger than me though too, so she didn't peak until.
No, but Lisa Harvey, who
she was older than I was.
Older, yeah.
I think so, right?
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Then, so you did it. In that year, there was an 8K and a 4K at Worlds.
Right.
So you make the 8K team, and you go to Edinburgh. And what was that like?
That was very cool. I remember thinking that was a really cool experience. We stayed in these dorms, and there was just a good group of girls, and we tour about. You go, and I wasn't hurt, so I showed up, and I was fit and felt healthy and fast. I still felt like I was a little older than the average girl in the team, but it was just a good group of us. I remember going around and checking out some of the castles and things before the race. And then I remember they did some we didn't get drug tested, but it was I think they were doing some sort of research thing. So we all had to do some kind of drug urine test stuff before. And I remember thinking that was the first time I had to pee in a cup. I was oh, this is kind of stressful. Even though you're not doing anything, it's still stressful for some reason. But yeah, and I remember being just being in the moment of that race, and it was really hard. So Dublin was it started on a horse track, whereas this one was just in a big field. So yeah, I do remember that one being really tough, and just the weather was crappy. But I think that's cross country, right?
That's the way it is.
Why.
And then,
but I think it ended up being 79th or something on that.
Yeah.
79th.
It was good. It's a good result.
Nice.
You're racing world champions too, right? Tiernek Baba's in that race, and Paul Radcliffe might have been in that race. Some big time runners are.
And I beat some of the Canadians, so I remember being happy about that.
I'm so grateful that Sue took the time to take us through her journey. I, as someone who has never had a career like Sue's, think about the races that I've done, and they come back in such clarity for me because they were so important in the ups and downs of my life. And what surprised me with Sue, and what really inspired me with Sue, is her resilience throughout her entire career. But even those really big moments, making a national team, winning a medal at CIs, those were just steps in her journey. She was identifying herself as one of Canada's best, and she worked so hard to get to every point that her inspiration was more the journey rather than one specific event that defined her as an athlete or defined her as a runner.
Yeah, and I think the phrase she used about, these things aren't linear, they're not linear, is so critical for endurance sports, where, she would go through these downs, then, be able to stick around for the ups and go through that, and that, determination over long periods. And you see, the stories we heard, she wasn't always the best runner, she didn't get the NCAA offer and so forth, but she kept pushing, and then, every year she kept building on that and going through that kind of very not linear path, and able to be an athlete, not only a top athlete at the university level, but post-university, into her 30s is what we've heard on the running side. So really, really cool how that played out.
Yes, and that linear growth, a big step there that I think she was a little bit nonchalant about, but it was super impressive to me, was making that jump from living in Winnipeg, being at the top of her game as a university runner, and seeing an opportunity to train as a professional in a group of women in the US in a small town that most people hadn't heard of, and that opportunity to train with some of Canada's best endurance athletes. And then, like I was saying earlier, Steve, just going after the dream. Very similar to Adam Smith saying, I've got this opportunity to race in Europe. I've got this opportunity to be on a team now, and saying, for me to get to where I want to be, I have to make this jump. And it's so impressive when people do that. So that's what I took away. Anything else from the first episode, Steve?
Yeah, just that drive and determination to push through all those up and downs over many, many years was what I took away from that.
And so that was the end of part one. Part two, we're going to dive into Sue's triathlon experience and that transition to becoming a pro triathlete, and then the eventual finale, which is, again, making it to World Championships.
Yeah, and just also the heart-warming and heart-churning stories that we're going to cover in that second part.
So stay tuned for part two.
Hey Pedalcast fans, you can now reach out to John and Steve through email. Our email is longhaul@umfm.com. longhaul@umfm.com. So you can send us all your questions, all your compliments, and we might get to them on the Pedalcast. So thanks for listening, and reach out to let us know what you're thinking. Thanks for listening to the Long Haul Pedalcast. Be sure to subscribe and keep listening to all of these incredible stories that will help inspire you to create your own long haul journey.